Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Got a lot we are going to get to today, and I want to begin. You probably heard about this by now, and I'd be glad to take your phone calls on this topic on the subject of Bill Gates and his explosive memoir. He's a former Secretary of Defense, 2 years under President Bush and 2 years under President Obama, and he has come out with a scathing memoir and critique of President Obama, Joe Biden, and even Hillary Clinton. And there's some stuff in here that is enormously troubling to me, and I'm sure it is to you, and I would be glad to get your responses and your take, your reaction to all of this. Now, Bill Gates, again, was Secretary of Defense for 2 years under under George Bush, and then for 2 years under Barack Obama. Now, I'm going to start with what I find the most disturbing part of his memoir. The book is not officially going to be released until next week, but the Washington Post and I believe the Wall Street Journal got access to a pre-published version of his memoirs, and the Wall Street Journal yesterday afternoon published an extensive excerpt from the book, and Bob Woodward, this is the guy, All the President's Men, brought down President Nixon. He's written about a 6-page analysis or summary of what he's found in the book. Now, I want to read some excerpts from Gates's piece from the book itself as published on the Wall Street Journal. And then we're going to come to some of the things that Bob Woodward says, and I'll tell you what I find most troublesome, and this is what I want to get your reaction to. Now, Gates says he was brought in to be Secretary of Defense under George Bush. I was brought in, he says, to help salvage the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, both going badly when I replaced Donald Rumsfeld in December of 2006. Now, I've talked with you frequently about this. I believe it was it was not a mistake for us to go into Iraq or Afghanistan. It was right for us to go in. It was wrong for us to stay. Bush made the right call by sending troops in. We believe, we had good intelligence to believe, well, we knew that the Taliban was based and al-Qaeda was based in Afghanistan. So they were in power in Afghanistan. They were responsible for 9/11. We had every reason and every moral right to go in there and remove the Taliban from power. We did that in the space of about 3 months. I mean, by January of 2012, they were toast in terms of running Afghanistan. At that point, ladies and gentlemen, we should have declared victory and come home. We went in there, we neutralized the threat to the United States, we come home. We tell the Afghanis on the way out of the country, look, if you put somebody else like this in power, we're going to come back, we'll bomb you back to the Stone Age. Don't make us come back here. That's what we should have said. It was wrong to stay. You cannot do nation building in a Muslim country. It is impossible. Iraq is a complete disaster, falling apart by the day, Muslims killing Muslims. Christians are fleeing in droves because it's not safe. They're getting shot at from both sides there. Afghanistan is falling apart. Taliban is coming back into power. Al-Qaeda is coming back into power. The rules of engagement we have, they're making it almost impossible for our guys to defend themselves. They got to wait till they get shot at before they try to neutralize some kind of a threat. So it was right for us to go into Iraq because Saddam Hussein, we had good intelligence to believe that he had weapons of mass destruction and that he intended to use them against us. That's what our intelligence said. It turns out that some of that intelligence was lacking, but that was the intelligence we have. And you have to go with your best understanding of the facts on the ground. If you wait until you know everything about everything, you're dead, you're toast, you're lying on a slab somewhere. So we had the right to go into Iraq and neutralize Saddam because he was a threat to the United States. Now, at that point, we should have left. Declared victory, we pull down the statue, we find Saddam in his hidey hole, he's hung by the neck until he's dead, and then we leave. We declare victory and we go home because you cannot do nation building in a Muslim country. It's impossible. Can't do it in Iraq, can't do it in Afghanistan. And this was the major error in President Bush's thinking. He's a good-hearted man, he's a decent man, he's a good man. He wants to believe the best about everything and everybody. So I don't fault him for his intentions, but he actually believed the bilge that Islam is a religion of peace. It's not. It's a dark, evil, and wicked religion. It's a religion of death, destruction, domination, tyranny, and totalitarianism. That's what it is. That's what it is. It's not a religion of peace at all. And President Bush believed that. He also believed that all you got to do in these Islamic countries is give people a taste of freedom and a taste of democracy. They'll hunger for it and they will want it. That's absolutely wrong. It's only where the Spirit of the Lord is that there is liberty. That's what the New Testament says, 2 Corinthians 3:17. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. There is no Spirit of the Lord in Islam. And President Bush just did not understand the difference between Christianity and the spirit that's behind Christianity and the spirit that's behind Islam. So anyway, this is an excursus here. So we should have gone into both Iraq and Afghanistan. We should not have stayed. And so Gates is brought in then to kind of clean up this problem created, I think, by this major error and misjudgment on the part of President Bush. And this, by the way, this illustrates why we have to understand that this multiculturalism is all swill. It is bilge. It is bogus. It's nonsense. Not all religions are the same. And President Bush believed that, hey, Islam is just like Christianity, only different. It's just a benign alternative to Christianity. It's not. It's pernicious. It's dark. It's evil. It's all about death and destruction and about annihilating Christians, annihilating the infidels. And President Bush just did not understand that, and we got mired down in Iraq and Afghanistan as a result. So anyway, Gates is brought in to salvage, that's his word, salvage the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, both going badly. Now listen to this. When I was sworn in, and listen to what's missing. I want you to read what his goals were for Iraq and Afghanistan. Tell me what's missing here. When I was sworn in, my goals for both wars were relatively modest. Now let me ask you this question. If you go to war, what should your objective be? Your objective should be to win. Your objective should be to conquer. Your objective should be to vanquish the enemy. But that's not what Robert Gates had in mind. It's not what apparently George Bush or Robert Gates had in mind. When I was sworn in, my goals, Robert Gates says, for both wars were relatively modest, but they seemed nearly unattainable. In Iraq, I hoped we would stabilize the country so that when U.S. forces departed, the war wouldn't be viewed as a strategic defeat for the U.S. Now, what do you hear in that? My goal in Iraq was not to win anything. It was to conduct ourselves in such a way that when we left, this thing wouldn't be viewed as a complete fiasco, a complete debacle, a, quote, strategic defeat for the United States, or a failure with global consequences. So what was he doing? He was playing not to lose. He wasn't playing to win because we'd already won. We should have declared victory and gone home. So there's no sense here that his goal wasn't even to win. It was to do something that would keep this thing from being viewed or perceived or seen as a catastrophic global abysmal defeat. That is not, ladies and gentlemen, that's not how you go to war. That's not how the greatest and most powerful nation in the world fights its wars, but that's what we've had since 2006. In Afghanistan, I sought an Afghan government and army strong enough to prevent the Taliban from returning to power and al-Qaeda from returning to use the country again as a launch pad for terror. Well, that's lost. That's gone. Taliban's back. Al-Qaeda's back in Afghanistan. Both of these modest goals he had, they're utter abject failures. He didn't achieve either one of these goals. Iraq is now considered a strategic defeat for us because that country's like we were never there. The sectarian violence, the death of Christians, it's like we were never there. And the same thing is in Afghanistan. Now, here's what I want to get to. I want to jump ahead because I want to give you a little bit of time to react to this in phone calls in the next segment. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about his relationship with President Bush and President Obama. But here's how Bob Woodward, and this is what I want your reaction to. Here's how Bob Woodward starts his critique in the Washington Post, also published yesterday afternoon. In a new memoir, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates unleashes harsh judgments about President Obama's leadership. You know, and as far as I'm concerned, you know, he doesn't even realize it, but the self-condemnation here, the self-indictment, Robert Gates, his goals were not to lose. I mean, what kind of a goal is that for the Secretary of Defense? Your goal is to win. So anyway, I think he indicted himself in his memoirs in a way that nobody, to my knowledge, has even pointed out yet. Anyway, Bob Woodward, in a new memoir, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates unleashes harsh judgments about President Obama's leadership and his commitment to the Afghanistan war, writing that by early 2010, he had concluded the president doesn't believe in his own strategy and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out. Leveling one of the more serious charges that a defense secretary could make against a commander-in-chief sending forces into combat, Gates asserts that Obama had more than doubts about the course he had charted in Afghanistan. The president was, quote, skeptical, if not outright convinced, it would fail. And this is in connection with Obama deploying an additional 30,000 troops, you remember, in this final push, this surge to stabilize Afghanistan before phasing down the withdrawal. And Gates says, I never doubted Obama's support for the troops, only his support for their mission. Now, that's a distinction to me without a difference. How can you support the troops and not support the mission? Because the troops are the mission. The mission is the troops. This is a meaningless distinction that you can support the troops, but you don't support the mission. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense to me. And remember, President Obama, look, he said that the war in Iraq, that's a stupid war. He says, I'm not opposed to fighting all wars, just stupid wars or foolish wars. I think he used the word stupid. He said Iraq's a stupid war. But Afghanistan, he says, is a necessary war. That's a good war. Now I want to come back, talk about the implications of him not believing in his own mission in Afghanistan. Stay with us. Focal Point, KFR Talk.